Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Recollection Step, a Grand Archive TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I am Taylor. Today, we're going to get into kind of what's been going on with the meta after the surprise Dissonant Fractal ban that happened a couple weeks ago. I think Dan edited it in with the last episode, a quick little blurb, but we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more.
Yep.
We're also going to go into kind of just like just everything about material decks today. Kind of things you want to take into consideration when you're building your deck and how you can have your material deck work in concert with your main deck a little bit better and just shore up your game plan a little bit more and figure out kind of what you want to do with that. But before we get into that, Dan, how have you been?
I have been getting ready for Worlds. Super excited. We had the announcement the other week that I will be casting once again. Super honored. Super grateful to Weebs for another opportunity to cast what I'm expecting to be some of the most exciting games of Grand Archive that we have seen in at least 365 days.
A little bit more even, because Worlds was early May last year.
Yeah, I said at least. I didn't want to. I don't want to do the math.
Well, I'll do the math. I'm a big math guy, so I'll do that for you.
That's why you're able to succeed when you play. And see, everyone knows I can only count to 9. That's where I cut off.
They took Rhapsody away, and now you can't count to 9 anymore to get your wins. And things just fell off a cliff from there.
They got tough. How about you, Taylor? What have you been up to?
It's a lot of the same, just getting ready for Worlds, a lot of World prep with Mitch and the rest of the team and getting ready for that, getting ready to do some traveling for that. So we had our regional in Fargo last weekend. We did. So, I mean, this segues right into kind of like the whole post-ban world pretty well, actually. So we had a 32-player regional at J-Dubs in Fargo for this. So it was a pretty good turnout. Despite being banned, Fractals still won the whole thing. But of the 5 regionals that took place after the ban, this is the only one that was taken down by Fractals. So it's definitely a competitive deck still. It's got a lot of life, a lot of fire left. Congrats to Noel for taking it down. Yeah. But I mean, everything else we've seen a win from Genbu, we've seen a win from Merlin, from Allies, from Suzaku. So very, very, very varied field so far.
I do want to say about our regional that, Noel did great. Obviously took it down. We do have a bunch of great players in the area too. We did have a couple of players who had bounties on their heads, and we're definitely not really sweating about winning that day. Taylor, I think you were still playing a very competitive deck. You were playing Astra, Wind Astra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fairly competitive. After this weekend, I don't know if it's as competitive as I would hope it to be, but it's getting the job done. It can swing with the big leagues. It's going to throw some punches and do pretty well for the most part, especially if you play that like really tight. It's got a lot of answers and plays a really good long game, obviously. So. Yep. So I listen, I'm not just going to give away packs for the store for free. I'm going to sweat it out. I got to save Josh some equity here. So,
so we had that. And then our other bounties were on Mitch and Kyle from Maindeck as well. Kyle was playing the deck that we released a profile for. Our last Grand Archive video was the Fire mid-range Guoja deck. A deck that Kyle and I both just absolutely adore. We love playing this thing. He went 3-2 that day. And it is a deck that you can definitely take wins with, but it's also like in a serious competitive metagame, it is going to it's going to have to fight a little bit, to get some of those wins. And Kyle's been practicing so much on like fractals and stuff during this entire meta. So I just say that he could have played a deck that he fought a little harder on, I'm sure, that day, or didn't have to fight as hard to get wins. And then Mitch was on something that day. He was on some Tenoris.
Okay, hold on. So first of all, I'm not going to let you slander Tenoris Neos like this. All right.
Okay.
This is like, there's a hidden gem here that is yet to be discovered. That I think is not able to put up with a lot of like really early aggression very well, but like it is going to just win a long game very handedly, right? Mitch was playing like a Fire Neos version, leaning on Glow Spires, and I forget what else. He was playing, I forget how far into domains he went, because he was doing some stuff with domains before, and he didn't really like a lot of them, so some of them came out, but I think he's got a decent amount in there yet. But yeah, so he's doing like Fire Domain Tony stuff. Not quite the Fun Assemble the Ancients combo we saw last year at Nats, piloted by Jimmy Lee, but still doing some sweet Neo stuff there. But we had in the Taiwan regional, this is like a 130 player regional, by the way. Sunset took fourth on the whole thing on a Water Neos build, also playing the new Doromagian Foundry. And yeah, I mean, like there's game here, and I think a lot of people kind of undersell it.
Yeah, I don't want to totally slander Tenoris. That wasn't my intention. I was slandering Mitch's kind of. He's been trying to put this list together for a little bit, not like a crazy amount of time, and it might have just it needed a little more time in the oven, I think, to get anywhere. He had a 2-2-1 for the day, but I also think a lot like Kyle, he was approaching this like, well, I'm on the bounty board. You know, I'm going to try something a little crazy, and if it works, it works. And I would say it was a little crazy, the exact build he was working with.
This is pretty wild. Like, he's got 3 copies of Hector in there, which I think most people would not have pegged as the Neos All-Star coming out of MRC Alter. No, and 0 Throne Sentinel. So like completely. It's just wild. He's got 2 in the sideboard, but like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's a weird decision, I think.
Running 4 copies of the Eternal Kingdom, but no Doromagia Foundry. So, I mean, it's tough to question Mitch, because Mitch has so many good results, but at the same time, a lot of sus decisions here in this list. So,
well, I think what this really highlights, specifically for Tenoris, a problem that we have every time the group or the whole team has tried to approach Tenoris, we end up with this issue where there's actually, and it's actually maybe exacerbated from Alter now, but there were previously like 80, 85 cards you kind of were trying to fit in the deck because of all these different strategies that are all part of the Tenoris package. So there's the domain strategy, there's the Neos package, there's the token relevant stuff. Then there's like the basic fire, accumulation of resources that you need to do as well. And then like, you probably should try to interact with your opponent in some way. Maybe, I don't know, floating memory cards, dungeon guides need to go in. And there's like 3 or 4 unique allies at the top end that are like, all seem like they'd be really good. And now we have Throne Sentinel. We have the addition of Hector. We have more domains to consider. So like, it's really tough to look, I think, at any individual Neos list and be like, yeah, this is the refined one, because it's really just tough to know which set of cards is going to be the most effective. So I don't mean to blast Mitch too much, because really it's a very difficult task to try and get this deck to the optimized state.
No, I think we need to blast Mitch. I think it's good that he gets blasted every once in a while.
It's true. I do like blasting Mitch when I have the opportunity to.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, if I was in his shoes, I would hope he was blasting me instead. So,
yeah, good. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, our regional was a ton of fun. It was so great to have Noel and a few of his partners traveling up to play in the event. It was really, really fun to have them up there, and we're hoping our next one even better than ever. We're discussing upping the pricing again. To see if we can use that to draw in some more people when there isn't a snowstorm happening. But other than Noel, we had a top 8 that had several players who was like their first event top 8ing as well, which was really cool. Who were all practicing quite a bit going into the event. So shout outs to some locals, Alex and Adam. And then we had some another guy from the cities who said we talked in our sort of after party thing. His name's Jeremy.
Yep.
And he had just kind of gotten into the game very recently and started grinding in the cities like 3 events a week, playing in Yetis every week. And now he just finally made a top 8 on Wind Seryu Gwoja. And it was really exciting to get to hear, these people getting to come up and see some competitive success at our event. And just can't wait to run another one.
Yep. Yeah, it was a ton of fun. And then, we talked about the winners of the other regionals, but just rounding out the meta from kind of all these post-ban tournaments, including some of the smaller store champs and also just some other like random circuits, like the Grand Library Finals I think that's also in Taiwan. Was this past weekend as well. So we had a bunch of results from that. So big ups again to MDuo, Fractal Insight for compiling all that. But again, we're seeing like a huge kind of bump in Fire Aggro. Like Fire Aggro is still just super represented. It's going to be pretty common in a lot of tournaments that you're going to. Which makes sense, right? It's like a consistent deck. It's always going to be doing its thing and helps. It's fairly straightforward for the most part. You're just always trying to attack your opponent. So it's just easy deck to pick up. Not easy, but great deck to pick up and just kind of go to an event with and not have to worry about too many things going right or wrong. Rounding out kind of the other 3 or 4 top decks here, most represented decks, I should say, are Tristan allies and still Fractals. So we are seeing Fractals metagame share dip a bit after the ban. Has not obviously died out by any stretch of the imagination. It's still very, very relevant in the metagame, still very prevalent. But we are seeing allies hang out around. And Tristan is actually the really surprising one to me here. Previously, before the ban, before US Nats, Wind Luxem was the Wind Assassin deck of choice. With a lot of players picking that one up and just really, I think, preferring a lot of the kind of more, I don't know, flexible package that it's got. It's playing a lot of the same Wind cards as Tristan, but Zander, I think himself just lets you play the game a little bit more flexibly. It just like lets you have a lot more decision trees and paths that you can take, whereas Tristan's like fairly linear. You really can't, you're forced into a certain cadence with her where you need to level up at specific times and at specific breakpoints, and you really can't bust out of that mold too much. Whereas with Zander, you can kind of just do whatever the heck you want whenever you want.
Yeah, one of the big differences between the two, if you want to compare them, is looking at their level 2s. Those level 2s really tell a big part of that story of why these decks seem so similar but do play very differently, where the Tristan level 2 wants you to gather preparation counters and not do anything with them as fast as you can, try to accumulate that card advantage. Whereas the Zander level 2, we're of course using Deft Executor because we're not insane. Deft Executor is granting you preparation counters at level 2 and then giving you an option to just spend 1 if you want to go ahead and pick up a card, and that gives you like a ton of flexibility and like, okay, you want to spend some of these things. You can do the really sick lines where you just like pick up a Surveil the Winds and just draw another card or whatever and gain the prep back, and that's awesome. Or you can do where this flexibility comes in, the lines like picking up a Thieving Cut or something that you can use to attack them another time and try and like take some things off the board, or a Slice and Dice letting you kind of go for these like, you know what, I'm just going to throw the Slice and Dice out there and maybe I can just hit with 2 of them and try and close the game that way, or maybe this one will get stopped or something, or deal with interceptors, and the next one I can hit them with. It's like they definitely have sort of divergent lines, but you're right. I mean, I don't want to totally cut you off here, but it's interesting to see the rise in Tristan specifically now.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure what to attribute to that. Like, part of it, I think, is just Tristan's linearity helps in a couple different matchups, and her more kind of direct endgame also helps in matchups. So Genbu has become a pretty big player in the metagame. It's like just right outside of that top 4 representation. And Tristan, I think Tristan's matchup is a fair amount better into that than Wind Luxem's is. We kind of saw in US Nats top 8, those streamed matches where Wind Luxem just never actually was able to put the game away against Genbu. It just really struggled. And it's because it's got like, it has to fight through so many different things, and it doesn't have the same amount of same quantity of ways to put cards into memory like Fire Luxem does, because it's designed as more of like a mid-rangey game than Fire Luxem. So it's sitting there kind of like trying to get to 10 to put the game away with a couple Light Weaver's Assaults, or find some other way to push through damage. Like you can get a Slice and Dice through or anything like that still, but it has a really hard time fighting through Genbu and Frostthorn Paladins, even with Ensnaring Fumes. Like there's just enough opposition that makes it difficult. Whereas Tristan does not have that issue. She gets to level 3. She gets to Mastermind Scheme, get to 12, 14, 16 prep counters, and then Shadow Strike for 25 or whatever. Unblockable. You can't put anything in front of it. Like she just doesn't need any help in that department. And then even beyond Shadow Strike, right? Like just those shadows are super useful. They can eat Genbu attacks. They can eat Frostthorn attacks. They can get in for extra damage as well. So like she's just, once she gets to level 3, she actually has a more flexible plan than Zander, just because she has more real options available with her level 3 package than Zander does.
Yeah, Zander's, I think one of the big differences between these two, before I get to that, an important part of context I wanted to mention here was there's a rise in general in the assassin viability due to the release of Winbless Lookout. Winbless Lookout, it turns out that just again a 2-cost, 2 to activate ally that gives you a prep counter on enter and has a glimpse effect as well. That is, it lines up so beautifully with the Reclaim plays early and everything. It's like, yeah, I mean, running this alongside Black Market Broker, some of those starts feel just like you zooming up on prep counters.
It's really hard to understate or overstate how effective Windbless Lookout is, especially in the Tristan decks too. Yeah. Like, I don't know if the Wind Luxem decks have picked up Lookout yet. I don't know if they will actually, because they're just not as reliant on preparation counters. But for Tristan, it's huge. Broker was like fine. It was a card you needed to play, but not necessarily a card you wanted to play, especially in like 3 or 4 copies. But you needed to play that many copies in order to have enough preparation counter generation to actually get to your level 2 in a timely manner and not go down on cards when you're doing that. Lookout just like speeds your whole game up by a huge margin.
I think like a turn sometimes, actually.
Like easy.
I think it gives you that ability to level to 2 a turn faster in at least a number of games than you were previously doing it. Because anytime you have to level to 2 and you don't draw 2, feels like you're going a little too far behind.
Yes.
But it's just it's crazy how cost downing something like that by 2 feels like Black Market's 4 and Windbless is 2. Just trying to make my statement make sense. But it feels like way bigger difference than just 2 resources. It's crazy.
No, it's huge. So previously, like Astra Ari was just like, you get paired up into Tristan, you're like, oh, this is a slam dunk. Like game's over. We don't even need to play this out. We'll go to the next round. See you later, bud.
Yeah.
Arasan is like taking that match 99% of the time. And Lookout like just changes that whole dynamic.
Yeah.
Big time. Like Tristan gets to play a lot more like freely now, because you can play Lookout and you can hold up interaction a lot more easily than like trying to pay 4 for Broker and still hold things up after that. Again, your consistency in getting to 2 timely is way better, which is actually like huge in that matchup, because as Tristan, you really need to get enough prep counters to either like threaten early Slice and Dice or get to 3 quickly in that matchup, or Arasan is just going to like snowball you with value big time. Whereas like game 1, so I actually played into a Tristan, which is kind of how I figured out this happening. Alex, he was on Tristan and took round 3 off of me. But like game 1, I made some misplays in the late game, just going for Cosmic Bolts too early. And I think I let that game get like out from under me. But game 2 just like got completely rolled. Like just I don't think there was a way for me to get out of that game. He dropped down a couple Windmill Engineers. He dropped down a Lookout. He was able to reclaim the Lookout, get more prep counters, and just like he was at 3 so fast, and I could not do anything. It was like Polaris was not helpful.
Yeah.
So,
and like getting back to my point I started to make and then decided to divert myself from earlier. Once it gets to that end game, once Tristan gets that end game, one of the big advantages Tristan has over Luxem now is kind of what you started to get at, Taylor, which is that Luxem's way to win. There are a couple now. I mean, we have like Illuminating Strike added. We have the Slice and Dice early lines and also Slice and Dice late lines that work. But the big one everybody knows is the double Lightweavers line, which is a gigantic, like putting 8 cards into memory, playing 2 cards from hand. And there's a huge difference between needing to set that up, even though Luxem is pretty good about denying interaction with that ability to reveal some number of Luxem, and it makes it harder for the opponent to interact. But against like a Genbu, like you're talking about, like a Genbu list with the power of Lost in Thought can have just a huge hand. It doesn't need to do anything because she's just swinging with a 3/9 and then going, okay, your turn, whatever. I'll hold everything up. Whereas Tristan can get that same lethal line for 3 cards in hand, 2 in memory, and the Shadow Strike. Shadow Strike costs 2, and it can do as much damage as the double Lightweavers line. And that is like such a big gain when you're going into a metagame where water is the other, like the threat that you're looking at. And you're like, how do I win the game while being able to pay for Frostbind or even like actually pay for a Glimmering Refusal? That comes up all the time against Fractals. It's like, well, actually I have enough. I'm just going to Shadow Strike. And if they Glimmering, I can pay it. Like worst case, I force 2 Glimmerings out and then I'm holding on to the second Shadow Strike and I kill them next turn or something.
Yep. Yes.
I think it's a pretty big gain. I think it's really cool. And I'm like really, really happy actually with Winbless Lookout. Like Korhazi Outlook before was just a little too oppressive. What she did.
I don't even think it was that oppressive. I think you just had the like perception of it being oppressive because that silence ability, the ability to stop your opponent from activating anything on your turn, is like it is strong. I don't want to downplay that, right? But like that's not what is like ending the game for you. Like the game was over before that happened regardless, because Tristan was able to set everything up that she needed to from the prep counter she got earlier off of Outlook. Like Outlook providing the prep counter was by far the best part of that card. The other ability was like just extra, it was fine.
I think the difference though is that Outlook was extremely strong early, just like Winbless Lookout is, but also late game, certain decks actually were denied the ability to interact with you. Like, I'm not saying it's like, oh yeah, every game you play Outlook, pull the prep off, I win the game. It's not what that is, but just exactly what we're talking about. Like if it were here now, Fractals is kind of out of things to do as soon as you pop that in Recollection. And then you just kind of win.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. So I think we're going to see more Tristan moving forward here. Just Lookout is super powerful, and it adds so much to the consistency of that deck, which is really what she was lacking previously. So like she can get to 2 and 3 on her own terms much more often now. She should be doing that almost every game. Whereas before it was like, who knows if I was going to be able to level to 2 in time to actually do anything. So
yeah.
But I mean, so kind of full picture here from our first couple weeks of post-ban tournaments. Like metagame's looking really nice right now. There's a lot of people playing a lot of different things, and obviously, like we don't have anything high stakes anymore. Now that Nats season's done, unless you're fortunate enough to be qualified for Gauntlet and Worlds, then obviously you're sweating a little bit trying to figure out what's going on. But like these regionals, I think in general too, are just kind of a really fun kind of open testing grounds for whatever people wanted to bring and play with. So I think we'll see that kind of continue to be the case up until Ascent Boston. And then we'll see if DTR brings anything new that really shakes up the metagame. So
DTR is going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I cannot wait for spoilers to start so we can start kind of speculating on what new decks will be available.
Yes.
But
yep.
And if you are looking for any DTR cards, Dan, I think there's some ways people can get DTR cards and also help out the channel, maybe?
Oh, there's a fantastic way they can do that, actually. If you are on the market to pick up the next set of Grand Archive, get yourself ahead of the competition, get the cards you need, and we ship out as soon as we receive our product, by the way. You can head over to jwwcards.com. Link is down in the description below, and even use discount code Maindeck to get 5% off your order. We do have Distorted Reflections on pre-order. right now. So you can head over there, grab a case, grab these starter decks, and get yourself set up so that when it comes to Ascent Boston, you are not missing everything you need to play that insane new Diana or CL deck that's taking over the metagame. You got to be ready for it. Mm-hmm. So head over there to jwwcards.com, grab some DTR, and doing that supports us, supports our LGS, and it supports you. So thank you so much for supporting all three of us.
All right. Yes. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the material deck and how we can utilize that to make more cohesive plans in our Grand Archive decks moving forward. In general, people love to use the material deck to just draw cards, right? Like that's your number one go-to first thing you think of when you think of material deck. Yep.
5 out of 5. GCR. 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5.
Easy game. Easy. Just auto slot. Like why?
Draw card. Draw card.
As far as I'm concerned, there's only one Divine Relic in the game, and it's Grand Crusaders, right?
Temporal.
That's it.
Sorry. Yeah. Grand Crusaders. My bad. Shout out to TCG. I mean, yeah. I love Cayman. I love TCG. I love Terry, Isaac, the whole team. They're great.
Absolutely. I mean,
even though we have slightly different opinions,
we'll get into, how Quicksilver Grail is a 2 out of 5 later, but right now we're talking about GCR.
They've amended it since then, to be fair.
Absolutely. Yes. To be fair, but we can't let that one die.
No, that means not dying.
No. Sorry for the inside baseball there. But anyway, so yeah, we love to use the material deck to turn Grand Archive from a draw 1 to a draw 2 game, right? You got Grand Crusaders Ring, you've got all the resonant baubles, you have Backup Charger, you have the new edition of Portentous Tengu. So there's like a ton of different ways to draw cards in the material deck now. Obviously, like that's just kind of the default. It's one of the first things people realize that is really powerful coming out of there. Because obviously, the more cards you have in hand, the more things you can do, the more powerful your plays can be and your turns can be, because you can just play more cards per turn. So, excellent. Like, we love that, right? That's great. But one of the other ways I really like to think about the material deck, and kind of the way I've been approaching deck building lately, is not just like, how can I use the material deck to create like a draw 2 game for myself? Because, my opponent's doing the same thing, right? Like, if we're both just drawing 2, I'm not getting any advantage. I'm not coming out ahead on this, right? How can I do this? And the way you do this is really by like looking at the material deck as kind of a library of tutor effects for yourself. Like, you get to not just draw a card, but you can pick any card you want, any effect you want, and just play it that turn, which is like, I think the most, it's not, I don't think it's overlooked in general, but I think it is the most overlooked aspect of the game, like by a pretty fair amount. It's being able to just pick out whichever effect you need at any particular time is insane. It cannot really be overstated how powerful putting a Nullifying Lantern under a Quicksilver Grail is against like Fire decks or Genbu decks. Just like when you need it, cannot be overstated how game-saving Safeguard Amulet can be in the right situation. Terrafring. There's just like so many different cards that are good. Polaris, obviously. Wand of Frost. Do you name it? There's an effect like
Wand of Frost has stopped me from winning the game so many times.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so annoying.
Yep. So obviously there's like still like some sort of balance to be struck here, because you do want to like draw multiple cards a turn. That's one of the best ways to maintain your influence, not in the terms of cards in hand and memory, but in the terms of just like the ability you have to make plays in the game. The best way to do that is just by drawing cards. So like, you still want some of that effect in your deck, but you want to be able to balance that with tutoring up these really powerful effects that can change the game for you. And then of course, also like, this is leaving out all the consideration to leveling your champion so far, right? And then unlocking more advanced elements or just other effects that way. So like, there's 3 different axes here where we have to kind of balance and figure out how to walk that line as we're building decks. So one of the main kind of like first questions I ask myself is like, how much redundancy is already in my deck to begin with? What do I have going on? Am I a fire aggro deck? Am I a fire Zander deck where like every card is essentially just like 3 or 4 damage I'm throwing at my opponent? In that case, drawing cards is super great because my cards all do the same thing anyway, right? I just want to to draw 2 cards. I want to throw 6, 7, 8 damage at my opponent per turn or more and go from there. And like for Fire Zander, like you'll even see the effects you grab out of the material deck that aren't drawing cards are things like Poison Dagger or Impact Hammer, Rook and Soul Knife, Mercenary's Blade, just more damage even, right? So everything you're doing is just like translating to damage. It might as well just be cards. So the more redundant your main deck is, the more you really appreciate, I think, card draw in your material deck, because you just want more of those effects anyway. Whereas like if your deck is just more of a mid-rangey deck or a control deck, and you've got a bunch of different kinds of effects in your deck, you've got a bunch of different plans, a bunch of different allies, a bunch of different actions that do different things, and you want to be able to find the right one or supplement your hand when you don't have the effects you're missing. That's really where like you want more of these effects that are going to let you kind of tutor up whatever you want to do and play some impactful plays rather than just drawing all these cards.
I think another way to approach that idea, just to see if we can help make this kind of more understandable for other people, is you sit down with your deck. I mean, it struck me when you're talking about specifically the latter type of deck, the more controller mid-range deck. You have a variety of different effects in your deck. You can imagine, just like look at any water deck running around right now. Fractals is maybe a bad example because they do have a lot of fractals in some way, but in the same way, decks like that tend to run things like Lost in Thought and Frosthorn Paladin that needs certain setup, and then they run some variety of negates and some things that deal damage. And if you compare that to like the Hanky allies list, that was like 53 allies that were almost entirely all just 2/3s for 3. And then there's a couple other things. You think just about
the pinnacle of redundancy.
Yeah, exactly. You consider like, okay, if I pop Grand Crusader's Ring in the ally deck, I am going to draw an ally 9 out of 10 times. I'm going to draw an ally that's going to be a 2/3 for 3. If I pop a Grand Crusader's Ring in the control deck, I'm going to draw something. And you have no guarantee as to what that thing could be. Lost in Thought number 3. It could be Glimmering Refusal number 2. It doesn't, like, whatever. It could just be some random thing. So when you're deciding, you're going into your turn, and you know, we're going to go back to our talking about playing at your peaks and figuring out like what you're trying to do every turn, what your role is in that game. And you think about, it's time for me to materialize. I can do anything I want. If I pull out a card draw and I'm playing a control deck, what are the odds I actually draw the thing that I need to get out of the situation? They're pretty low because you have just a variety of things. Whereas if you had packed your deck with tools that can help, even if they're not obviously you can't put your material deck doesn't just have a Glimmering Refusal in it, but it might have something
maybe one day.
We can only hope. But it might have something that can, if you think about your outs, think about the things you need to do, it can like, okay, well, instead of negating this thing, I could -3 its attack, and that's pretty close. So you can find something that still does the thing you're trying to do. Whereas for the ally deck, maybe you're just like, yeah, I mean, literally all I need to do is keep drawing allies to win the game. That's the game plan. Then you love drawing. So that's, I think, just trying to highlight those differences a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not to say like the redundant decks, the aggro decks, the ally decks are not going to play some of these other cards. Like they'll still play Safeguard Amulet because that's going to like, even the more mid-rangey control decks, if they're planning to win with non-combat damage, some of those can win still pretty quickly. So you still just need some of these effects in order to slow your opponent down enough to actually like get the extra turn you need to win.
Yeah. And actually, in particular, I want to highlight the ally matchup. I mean, Henke is the list like that is kind of a weird example because if you go back and watch the Nationals stream, we had day 2 a marathon ally versus ally mirror match. And those games are always marathons, but when it gets to be untimed like that, it's quite a fight. So the ally matches are fascinating because if at the like deepest level, what they come down to is both players attempting to use every possible resource to gain board advantage. And they both have kind of a similar set of tools, although that was an interesting match because they had slightly different material decks, and that completely impacted their lines. but it was like every single turn was like, okay, I can play these 2 allies and this material deck card, and that allows me to fully clear your board. And then just flips back the other way. Okay, I can play these 2 allies and then play this material deck card, and then through a totally different circumstance allows me to clear your board. And things like putting out Terrafring to try and defend your board against the opponent, and then finding, okay, well, if they're going to Terrafring, here's the route I can use to try and actually I need to play my Dream Fairy and then do this route to clear your board. So there, even in those matchups, it's not just card draw, card draw, card draw. It's some amount of that, but then a bunch of cards that are like, how can I get through in that matchup so I can end up being it's not just a coin flip. I want to be the one that has the advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, again, there's just so many more things you can do with the material deck than just draw cards. It's like the coolest part about this game, actually. Like, people are like, oh, I like going to level 3. I like playing Crux cards. I like playing Neos cards. That is really cool. That is pretty dope. It's one of my favorite things too. But also just being able to like look through a deck of cards, pick out whatever you want to do that turn, and use that to your advantage by either like advancing your game plan or stopping your opponent's game plan. Super, super underrated aspect of the game. Maybe it's rated. I don't know. For me, I feel like it's underrated. I feel like it's really hard to actually like rate that aspect correctly.
One thing that I think is actually underrated is how, when you're building a deck, how your champion choice changes what choices you can, but also should make in your material deck. So like a great example is comparing a level 1 Lorraine ally material deck. Okay, that's a Spirit of Wind or something, a Lorraine level 1, probably at least 1 0-cost weapon. I was going to say probably a Sword of Seeking, but these days you actually have options too. That's kind of unique there.
Even before that, you had like Ornamental Greatsword.
Yeah. Yep. Like, we did have options then, but now we also have the addition of Hwaji, and that kind of changes your build. But you have like kind of you have 3 things that you definitely need. And then you have, let's say you have a Divine Relic, and then you have 8 more slots. And it's like, how, what do you want to put in from there? What kind of redundancies, what kind of card draws, what kind of whatever things? You have a bunch of slots. You compare that to, you build 2 really good examples are both Merlin and Diana, but we'll just talk about Merlin because Taylor's here. So we have Spirit of Fire, we have Lorraine level 1, Merlin level 2, Merlin level 3, 0-cost sword for Lorraine. You have Majestic Spirit, and then after that, it's often like, well, Prismatic Edge is a pretty common route, or maybe you did I'm doing Kongming and Merlin, or Kongming and Lorraine, like Taylor did in Toronto. And you're at this point, you've already filled up over half of your material deck. And you still probably want like Drawn Blade and some other things like.
We have not even talked about a Divine Relic yet.
Oh yeah, Divine Relic slot. Yep. So like I think one thing that's really underrated is like you can have these really powerful champions. Like we know Merlin level 3 is one of the strongest level 3s in the game, just for like raw card advantage, access to some powerful level 3 advanced plays. But there's a cost that is actually really high, but I think it's the cost of that material deck that isn't always like really taken into the discussion when you're discussing the power level of various decks. And like Merlin not having the room to run all of these tech pieces, that hurts to the point where we saw in Utrecht earlier this year, and we talked about it on the podcast then too, but like Noel's Water Merlin, we always talk about Merlin is designed for any individual metagame. He didn't play a Divine Relic. And yeah, I think it was the right call.
I think you're absolutely right. Cause like Backup Charger was in there, I think, if I'm remembering
for
correctly.
Fracturize specifically.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So like you actually wanted Backup Charger over Grand Crusader's Ring, so you get the Fracturize interaction. And then after that, like, what are you taking out for like Grand Crusader's Ring or Temporal Spectrometer or whatever your Divine Relic of choice is, right?
Obviously Temporal.
Obviously Temporal. Okay. So we'll get to Temporal later on because that is relevant for Ascent Worlds. But
true.
Before then, so a little tease for the end of the episode. But yeah, I mean, like at that point, what do you do, right? And we're seeing a lot of the similarities with Genbu decks too, where a lot of them they're priced into Gojo 1 and a Fate Stone, a Shenju. You're probably at this point, a lot of the Genbu decks are going to 3. We've seen some cut level 3, keep level 2, cut level 3 for some extra stuff, but like that's kind of the point where you need to start like thinking about what all effects you need in your material deck, right? Because you just aren't going to have all of them. And then of course, like level 3 is a relevant effect as well. It's not just like going to level 3 and unlocking Luxem, because the Genbu decks aren't playing any Luxem anyway.
No.
But that's generally going to be a recover 3 effect for free, and also an effect to protect your Shenju if you need it to from targeted removal or anything.
Yeah, because it turns on the level 2 lineage release, which is like one of the stronger lineage releases in the game.
It's very effective. It's very, very powerful. You can use it for a multiple. So not only can you like save your Genbu or your Suzaku or whatever from targeted removal with it, but any sort of like anything your opponent's going to do to kind of just like get a little bit of advantage or a big advantage, like in this case, smoke bombs. If they're going to smoke bombs your Genbu or your Seiryu in order to get past it with a big attack, well, not only can you stop that stealth, but you also deny the draw, because the whole effect gets countered or fizzles since it doesn't have a target anymore. So like that's just a really big power play in general. But you've got to now weigh including that in your material deck versus like including more card draw or including more safeguard amulet effects or what have you.
Yeah. So Taylor, here's, I think, the crux of the discussion that I know a lot of our audience is going to be asking when this episode releases. They see it's about material deck and they're like, because I've heard this from a lot of our audience as well. So I'm trying to build Grand Archive decks, right? We have a lot of people who like to just take, whatever works and whatever, net deck the good decks, which is awesome. We have a lot of players also who are like, I'm trying to make whatever. I'm trying to make Water Mordred work. I'm trying to build X deck. How do I make more effective material deck decisions? Like where do I even start when I put my list together? Okay, it's on champion Y or at champion X. What do I look at next? What's the next step to figure out where do I take this material deck?
So I think your next step is just deciding how proactive you want to be with your deck, or how proactive or reactive you're going to be, right? The more proactive you are, the more redundant your deck is, the more aggressive your deck is. Lean into card draw more. Like lean into just finding more of those same effects if that's what you need, because you always know what you're going to get then, right? You still are going to include some staples, obviously, but going back to the allies example, you just want to be playing 2-3 allies, or even just like Fire Zander. You just want to draw more burn. You want to draw more damage. Just keep doing that. If your deck is more mid-rangey, more control-y, like let's say you're playing a Water Tony Neos list, right? You want to go to level 3. You want to get there safely. You want to lock down the board. You've got a bunch of different stuff in your deck. You've got 3 Tonys already in there in your material deck. Drawing cards is like obviously still good, but you can try and start fitting some of that in your main deck now. You can move that burden there, and you can save the material deck for more important considerations as you're leveling up, because you're probably not leveling straight to 3. So this is where you need to protect yourself a little bit more. You're probably putting your Terrafrings in, your safeguard amulets. You're considering your card draw less. And then obviously you still are going to have some card draw, because Alchemical Scripture is like an insane Neos card, right? Like that's how you're taking over the game at level 3.
Right.
You're kind of finding again where you need your power to be. Do you need your power early? If you need your power really early, oftentimes you will want more card draw. I shouldn't say more card draw. I should say more Grand Crusader's Ring effects, where you're getting that immediate card draw, the immediate payoff. If you are looking to win late or flex your power late, that's where you want some more specific stuff to continue to draw the game out and figure out kind of what is going to help you get there. And give yourself more turns to get there, right? Like when you think about drawing cards, oftentimes it's so you can throw more damage at your opponent. You're ending the game quickly. You're trying to get to that end game state. If you are trying to play a longer game, obviously that's where you don't need to draw cards quite as much. You need more effects at your disposal when you want them. And a lot of those were kind of like vague statements, but it's hard to really lock down exactly what you need when you need it.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna hammer in a little bit on some of what you're saying. So I think that'll help a little.
Yeah. I'll give it a specific example of like Tristan versus Luxem. These are both kind of mid-rangey decks. that are both Wind Assassin, and they both are kind of playing a flexible game where they can try and get aggressive a little earlier. They've got things like Assassin's Ripper in their material decks, which isn't actually drawing a card, but it is effectively drawing a card when you're trying to damage your opponent and go for the kill with a slice and dice, right? But Zander is all after that is just playing like a lot of it's playing Backup Charger, it's playing Grand Crusader's Ring. I guess so is Tristan. Let me actually maybe pull up a list here quick, just so I can have a better reference. But
yeah, while you're pulling that up, I think one thing that some people might get a little confused by is, you just said Assassin's Ripper is like drawing a card,
yes.
which obviously you're losing a card to get a weapon on board, but I think that really highlights where your brain is at with this, and I think it's a really good mental state to be in, which is that I think, Taylor, you like to think of the result of the card, not the card itself, right? You're not necessarily thinking of I'm going to when you say I'm going to play a Grand Crusader's Ring and draw a card, you're not just thinking this is going to let me go to 9 cards in hand. That's the important thing. Mm-hmm. But it's more importantly, it's that if I'm playing a deck where I'm trying to play Grand Crusader's Ring to draw a card, it's because I want this card to become 2 to 4 damage or something, or something like that. And so when you say Assassin's Ripper is like drawing a card, it's because the turn you go for that Ripper, you are already thinking, Taylor's already thinking, once I get this out, it'll be worth this much damage, and that's because I'm going to pair it, and then I'm going to pair it with the slice and dice, and that's going to cause me to win the game this turn.
Yep. Yeah. So if you think about it that way, right? Like Assassin's Ripper is representing 6 damage with the slice and dice. So like, what card are you drawing? If you get a Grand Crusader's Ring in that situation instead, like what card are you drawing that could give you 6 damage in that deck? Unless it's specifically slice and dice that you need. But then you're probably already in a weird, that's a weird game state in the first place, where you're like digging for that specifically because you'd need like the 9 damage or whatever. Right.
Right.
But yeah, so like Assassin's Ripper is it's so much more powerful than just drawing a random card in that situation. Like what if this draws you into a Veiling Breeze? Like that does nothing for you if you're trying to just push damage. What if it draws you into even like a Windmill Engineer? Like sure, you get to put that down, replace itself, and hit for 1, but that 1 is 0 damage in comparison to 6 damage, right? You're just trying to like do 2 different things. Again, kind of like why I compare that also the card draw for like more redundant decks like Fire Zander, or even like Fire Lorraine, Wind Allies. A lot of the times that card draw represents like the maximum amount of damage your deck is going to do. So in Fire Zander, your individual card damage tops out at like 4. Doesn't really matter what you're doing. You can Rending Flames, right? That's awesome. That's obviously a really good play. But for the most part, you're just trying to find more effects that are just doing 3 to 4 damage at your opponent. And even with Wind Allies, this is kind of where you start counting to like not 9 but 8, because that lets you play 2 3s for 3 that turn if you have 8 cards in hand. So the more the cards in your deck just translate to damage in general, the more powerful your card draw regalia is. Where the more your cards in your deck, in your main deck, translate to whatever effects you need to control the state of the game or control the board or stop what your opponent's doing, that's where individual card draw is like less effective, because you're just drawing any random card with the hopes that it's going to be one of like 10 effects that's useful for you in that moment. Whereas if that card is a Blinding Orb or it's a Smoke Bombs, Smoke Bombs is a bad example because I'm going to actually lump that in the damage category. Yeah. But like if it's Safeguard Amulet, Clarent, I mean, there's not a ton of like other good regalia at the moment, but even like Insignia of the Krahazi, Alchemical Scripture, just like Wand of Frost, Crystalline Mirror, Nullifying Lantern.
He's going to name every regalia in the game.
Exactly. Yes. But like these are all like really specific. Yes, exactly. But like these are all really specific effects that you're not going to be able to just draw on a whim if your deck has a bunch of different things going on, or not a bunch of different things going on, but a bunch of different answers to specific threats.
Let's take that, and let's also talk about, I think when you're approaching building your deck, a really important thing to do is consider what your main deck already is doing. I would generally probably start with the main deck before I build out the entire material deck. Like your material deck might have like the lineage you're going to play and stuff. You can go back and look at it later, but you get your lineage, you'll build your main deck, and then you go back and see, okay, now that I have my main deck built, what do I need? A great example is we look at the fractal lists that have been performing. Everyone knows those pretty well. Main board for Zhang Zhao. A lot of our lists were a turbocharge also, sometimes doing things like it between main and side, gentle respite in there. All of those are already our like card advantage engine, right? Mm-hmm. So then you get to the material deck, and there are some lists that were running baubles occasionally, and those are generally like very pointed, like I just want to have a leg up in this matchup and get an additional card because they're going to be trying to keep me off of cards in some way or something. But a lot of the time you're not filling your material deck in that list with card draw for one. I mean, part of what we talked about before was one reason, but the other reason is because your main deck has a bunch of card draw already.
Yep. Yeah. The Fractals like material deck also is like a really interesting example here too, because this is like basically what a lot of them composed of were, it was a backup charger, it was Tengu, and then a bauble. Sometimes it was charger, two different baubles, but their Divine Relic is almost always QSG at this point, Quicksilver Grail.
Right.
So they aren't getting that Grand Crusader's Ring effect. But oftentimes you would see up to like 3 other card draw effects. And a lot of times that was interesting because while that's not a deck that is looking to turn its cards into damage right off the bat, or like where every card is dealing, 3-4 damage or whatever, every card is a 2-3 ally, a lot of its cards are really reliant on the number of fractals you have. And that deck is incredibly redundant with fractals, obviously, hence the name. And so you were like often playing card draw in that material deck in order to draw into more fractals in order to enable what the rest of your deck was doing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That is an example of, that's been a weird example this entire podcast because it does have redundancy and it also has a pile of different effects. And yeah, I blanked out my memory the fact that we did always run Tengu in it as well.
That was like a really like difficult deck for me to like kind of come to terms with as far as like including all this card draw, because there's also a ton of other really good effects you can include. Like obviously Nullifying Lantern's been great. Nullifying Mirror is really good. Sometimes you want to get Viridian Trinket in there as well to counter other fractal decks or Genbu decks or whatever water deck you're worried about. But outside of the card draw and the level 1, that the material deck is just full of answers, right? It's full of really reactive regalia that's going to stop what your opponent is doing. And so whenever we started talking about adding more card draw to that material deck, I was like, what guys, Fractals is a control deck. What are we doing? Like, it took me a really long time to be like, oh, okay, wait, no, we actually need this card draw in order to draw enough fractals to actually enact our game plan and do what we wanted to do with the rest of the deck, right? So again, it kind of goes back to that like redundancy factor of your deck, where Fractals has some really powerful effects and some really specific effects, but it's also just a pile of a third fractals, and you really just need to get a good amount of them out on the board before you can do what you want to do. And the card draw there is actually like really helpful with that.
There's a point even where we were actually testing Wild Heart Liar in the material deck. Wild Heart Liar being a 1-cost regalia that is not a fractal, but it is reservable. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it was reservable was a way to guarantee you draw a fractal just for the sole purpose of having a reservable item to turn on Zhang Zhao. So it's not a fractal, but you could have out 2 fractals and then materialize a Wild Heart Liar and immediately play your Zhang Zhao that turn. Whereas if you played another fractal, you couldn't play a Zhang Zhao until the following turn and get the card draw off of it.
Yes.
So there were definitely some interesting deck building decisions that we were really trying to play with going into the national season as well. I think one thing I really want to highlight too is, one thing that you're looking at is when we talk, you have that main board built and you're figuring out what you need to do with it. you're really trying to think about particular lines, particular game states, and particular cards in your deck, how to enable them. So like Wild Heart Lyre is a great example of like building around Zhang Zhao, trying to find a way to do that. Channeling Stone, another one that is like an interesting way to kind of like play around a particular card in the deck as well. And there are a number of champions that have card choices that are really built around particular game states. Tristan is a great one where the boots, I'm totally blanking.
Windwalker boots.
Windwalker boots. That's it. Yeah. Windwalker boots is a card that I think you still have to probably play it in Tristan, but it's a card that probably will see fewer game states where it gets played in Tristan with the addition of Winbless Lookout now, because boots would often be the go-to materialize when your hand isn't set up to generate 4 preparation counters quickly on its own. And you would just go, instead of trying to just dig for cards, it's actually correct to just put boots out right now because it guarantees I start getting prep counters so I can potentially get to that level up the next turn. And I think an important thing to do when you're deck building is to look into your list. Actually, Tongu in Guoja is another really good example of that as just a guaranteed quest counter. Look for these cards that can, even if drawing a fractal would have been better than playing a Wild Heart Lyre, it's about how can I not have to take that risk? How can I just guaranteed get the thing that is maybe slightly less powerful than the main board card, but it does the thing I need to do guaranteed, and it creates a consistency for my deck that I don't have otherwise. And I think those are really important material deck cards to play.
Yep. Yeah, we're seeing that a lot with Goja lists between Backup Charger and Tongu. Like the Genbu lists, a lot of them they might be dropping Backup Charger if they've got to pick one or the other, because like you said, you get that quest counter for the not efficiency, but the just going along with your game plan, advancing your own game state that way, right? Whereas like Backup Charger in a vacuum is a more powerful play in water because you get to fracturize the power cell token. But in Guoja, the quest counter is more important. In going back to finally following up on this Wind Luxem versus Wind Tristan example, right? Tristan has a lot more options for her material deck in that, like, she wants to run Windwalker boots. That's less of an option, more of a requirement. But she wants to run Shadow's Claw for the synergy with her Fantasias at level 3. She might even want to run Shadow Reaver in addition to Shadow Dancer, the 2 level 3s that she can run, since Shadow Reaver can level up into Shadow Dancer, even though it's a 3 into a 3, and provide you some more flexibility and utility that way. Whereas like Zander obviously doesn't have those options. Xander's going to be running Mercenary Blade probably because of that, because that combos with Slice and Dice a little bit more. Always going to run Assassin's Ripper. Sometimes you see that dropped out of Tristan lists. Usually they're both running Blinding Orb because that's so powerful. But yeah, I mean, these are the kinds of things you need to think about as you're putting your deck together and looking at the main deck and trying to figure out what your material deck can do to complement that.
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I think it's obviously like one of the, we've said for, has it been years now since we've been doing it? When did we start this?
It has been like a year and a half, probably.
Yeah, year and a half. Well, okay, almost to plural. We'll celebrate plural when we get there.
Technically, that's more than one, so that would be plural.
Okay, it's fractionally plural.
The math major in me says is plural.
Okay, fair enough. Well, for a year 0.5, we've been talking about how important the Recollection Phase is. Of course, Recollection Step is our favorite podcast to talk about the Recollection Phase in. But
hold on, how important the Materialize Phase is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, why did I say that? Jeez. Where am I even today? I've screwed up like multiple things. Just all right. Throw me in the river. I'll surface again when it's time for Worlds.
I think it's.
But we've talked about the Materialize Phase. We've talked about how important that is. I think going back to like national season last year, I had a big epiphany at that event where when we got back and recorded, I really wanted to talk about the Materialize Phase and how a lot of people like tunnel in on certain lines as they're playing. And I think people tunnel in on certain lines as they're building as well. Certain cards, certain things. And this season, we've talked a lot about if you're losing to fractals, stop playing Grand Crusader's Ring. Stop it. Like if you're like, I am losing to fractals too much, and you didn't put Quicksilver in your deck yet, there were still things you could have done, right? And I think there are still things that people could be playing with, experimenting with, toying with. You know, we're seeing Art of War in sideboards, which is really great, because that's quite good in certain matchups. I think, especially with some of the new tricks that we have in MRC Alter, where we didn't talk about this earlier, but I have been surprised at the low representation of robots, of automaton focused strategies. And I still think Mercurial Heart is a bit of a gem that it's very specific, but in the right decks, this card it enables some crazy rallied advance turns. It enables turbocharges in multiple, which I have been singing the praises of multiple turbocharges for a while, even with just backup charger in the deck. But when you find this deck where you get to play Mercurial Heart, you get to set up, okay, when I draw Rallied Advance, this is crazy. When I draw my second turbocharge, this is crazy. If I'm doing an Overseer thing, this is crazy.
If I have counter interference, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
You get to save the automaton I just buffed up and then draw a card. Beautiful.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing where, okay, let's get the brewing back on here. Let's mess around a little bit, because like I think if anything, I want people to take away that, yeah, we're not going to say drawing cards is bad. And I think Taylor pointed out some really good decks where it's really important to have a certain amount of card draw as something you do, but you can't, I just don't think we need to be locking into rings. It's got to be ring here. You know, there are tons of lists where it's like really important. And there are formats, Taylor, where you can't just run Grand Crusader's Ring and everything.
Exactly. Like Grand Crusader's Ring is probably the default Divine Relic with fairly good reason. But yeah, if you are getting ready for Ascent Worlds coming up in a couple weeks, you cannot have Grand Crusader's Ring be your default, because you're trying to build 3 decks and you can only play 1 Grand Crusader's Ring. So something's got to give here. And you got to be looking for some more creative uses of these Divine Relics. Last year at Ascent Worlds, we only had 3. So you were forced to play, if you wanted a Divine Relic in every single one, you were forced to play all of them. You were forced to put a Temporal Spectrometer in a list, for better or for worse.
Go. So good.
I mean, we had an Ascent winning list with it, so it was good. It did its job.
Taylor was the one who played it.
Yeah, sure was. I mean, it was not bad. Like, I think it's pretty underrated in level 3 decks at the moment. People will say, "Oh, it just gets fracturized," or and now it just gets like crystalline mirrored or whatever. But like, it's causing your opponent to like use resources, and it costs you nothing. So at the very least, like, it's not, it's disruptive at the least. But anyway, you're like, if you want to actually like eke out advantages in this format, you need to find good ways to use Divine Relics that aren't Grand Crusader's Ring and that aren't Quicksilver Grail, because you can't play those in all 3 of those decks. Mm-hmm. This is just not going to happen. These automaton lists with Mercurial Heart could be very powerful, especially with the new automaton support from Alter. Like, there's a lot of options there. I'm gonna sing Temporal Spectrometer's praises here. I know people hate on it, but like, it's quite good. Art of War is going to be a very similar thing, actually, like where it essentially is just a temporal spectrometer with 1 counter on it. And sometimes you're going to get matched up into the ally decks and it's going to be a slam dunk. Sometimes you're going to get matched up into fractal decks and you're going to wish that was a temporal spectrometer instead, so you could get your Tristan 3 for free instead of only 1 less because of Art of War. So like, it's just you're gonna have to figure out ways to do that. Same thing, like, you only have 1 safeguard amulet to split between the 3 decks now too. So you have to find ways to get around that. Like, maybe you have to get a tamer deck in your trios list so that you can get access to Beast Bonder boots. Maybe you need another Lorraine deck to get Clarent in there. again, there's a lot of ways to get creative now. The material deck, like there's a ton of different regalia, ton of different ways to kind of go about this and figure things out. But the good stuff dries up really quick when you are trying to spread out 36 of these cards into just 12.
I think Art of War is a really fun one to think about as far as like when you're trying to come up with this list, the 3 different lists for trios, and there are going to be some amount of decks for sure, like a chunk of decks in that room, guaranteed that Art of War is going to be pretty fantastic against. But I don't think it's as easy as just going, well, one deck is going to run Ring, one's going to run Quicksilver, and then one's going to run Art of War, because depending on the 3 decks that you pick, you might not actually want any of them to run Art of War. Like Tristan was a great example, because like you can run Art of War in Tristan, and there will be matches where it is more effective against your opponent than you. But actually, Tristan really likes to attack with things the turn they come into play and get a little extra value.
I mean, Art of War and Tristan blows, actually. I'm just like, it's not good. It's not good. You are playing Sadies pretty constantly and bouncing them.
That
like,
sucks.
What are you doing with this? Like this, it's so incongruent with your deck, right? Like it's, again, you're going to have to put some thought into this and figure out what your deck really wants to do before you decide like, oh, okay, I'll just put the next least bad relic in my deck, right? Like Art of War it's very good. It's probably the 3rd best divine relic in a vacuum. But if you have a Tristan deck and you've got 2 other decks that really want Ring and Grail, do not put Art of War in that deck. You're going to have a very, very long day at day 1 of Ascent Worlds. And I don't want to put too much bad juju out in the air, but hopefully your partners can carry you, because you might not be winning a lot of games as Tristan either with Art of War in there.
I think a deck like Win Seriu is maybe a more applicable place to put Art of War in. That's a deck where your Fate Stones are not really beholden to having to deal with it, because they've been in play usually for even you'll play Beseeching Fate Stone and then you'll flip it on the next turn. And it just doesn't, that's fine. That's good. You can still attack. So, like if you're looking for really decks like that, or if you are one of the spicy like Rye players and trios, like huge, like shout out, like go for it. I can't wait to see. I hope Hyoka is there with Wind Rye or something. And like
there was a Water Rye in the finals of it last year.
There was, yeah. But like that's a deck where like, our Art of War, and maybe even some like spicy like Zhao Yu to like put it into play or something. I think that's the right one. I sometimes get the names mixed up, but maybe that's the one.
That's the I think it's him. Merlin doesn't hate an Art of War, right? Obviously, she doesn't really want it at level 3 when she's trying to play ghosts, but using it to get to level 3, like, exactly. You spend it to get to level 3, and now all of a sudden your ghosts are online, and you have 1 million health, so it doesn't really matter what your opponent was doing before then. Like there's ways to make Art of War work for sure. I'm not trying to like diss Art of War here.
But it's a really good discussion point, just because I think it wraps in all of that like theory that we talked about earlier.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Like, again, is this a tool that you can use to advance your game plan, or is it just like trying to find the next best draw one that you can put into your material deck? And if it's the next best draw one that you can put in your material deck, it's probably not really what you're looking for, because even the draw ones are more so trying to get to specific states in a game versus just drawing another card, right?
Right. Honestly, if I were entering, and now I can say that I'm not, unfortunately, I was unsure for a while whether or not I would be entering in teams this year. But if I were in teams and our team decided that a Tristan deck was going to be in our configuration and I was on it, I would be making quite a fight, I think, to at least test Mercurial Heart in it alongside like a 3 turbocharge list or something.
Just as like a turbocharge enabler?
Primarily, yes, as a turbocharge enabler. I think
there's no automatons in this list. What do you? Hold on.
That's okay.
No, I think you're tunneling on turbocharge too much. All right.
I don't know. I would just because I think Tristan already, the reason I say this is, and this is just, we're going through theory some more. So maybe Taylor will correct me here, but I played a fair amount of Tristan, and the amount of times that I Divine Relic before 3 are lower than the amount of times a Divine Relic after 3. So Tristan is not a deck that typically requires a Divine Relic. And currently you typically just run like Quicksilver because it allows you to just play into fractals stronger sometimes. But when that's not a choice on the table, I'm going to be thinking instead about, okay, I want this to be something that can be really impactful when I do need to play it. And so I'm kind of interested in just instead turning on more draw 2s to dig deeper into the deck as often as I can to try and find those surveils, find the Sadie, find the... I mean, Taylor, you've been in the situation where you're just like dying to find a kill card in Tristan and it's not coming up.
It's not there. Yep. No. Okay. So from that perspective, it makes a little bit more sense to me. I would still maybe be looking like, people can meme on this, but I'd still be looking at like Temporal Spectrometer here because like it's pretty good at almost any stage of Tristan's like level progression. You don't mind going to 1 with it if you have to. You don't mind going to 2 with it. And it enables you going to 2 with like 2 prep counters or 3 prep counters if that's what you need to do as well, which is actually really nice. No, but I mean, it's the same. Like if you go to 2 and you have 2 for free with Spectrometer and you draw 1 card, it's very similar to like banishing a floating and a random card from memory and drawing 2. You are at a disadvantage because you're not going to get to 3 with more prep counters, obviously, which is really where you want them for Shadow Strike. But if you just need to like get some health or get to the point where you can get to 3, get those shadows out, you just kind of need to turbo the game a little, or turbo your lineage progression a little bit more. So that flexibility is kind of nice. So you're probably putting out Windwalker boots a lot of the time instead of Temporal Spectrometer early.
Exactly.
Which is kind of where that gets kind of weird. Right. Because oftentimes too, you'll get backup charger early too instead of ring if you're playing both. But I mean, I can see where this is like actually a pretty viable line of play because like just draw 2s in the late game where you have a ton of influence and can afford to just pay 3 and still hold up like Incap and Veiling Breeze or something is very powerful. Especially those games where you're playing more of the control role than the aggression role.
I think the awkward thing about Spectrometer in the deck is exactly like you said. It's okay to Spectrometer and go to 2 and just draw 1 card or something. But if you just played Boots instead, I think you can go to 2 and draw 2, and that digs you deeper. And I think that's generally going to be the more useful route. However, the place where I would, if I really hope this discussion is helpful for people who are working through this, like, because I think you and I are both going through some interesting lines. I think the line that I like where I would consider Spectrometer instead is if I'm maybe giving my dungeon guides to another player on the team and running for Beseech instead. Because when you're running Beseech the Winds in the deck, now you can do the line where you activate Spectrometer on the second turn it's in play, and then Beseech immediately using it for 2 of the cost and leveling up. So the Beseech lets you kind of get a turn ahead of Spectrometer's normal advantage accrual. And so there I'd be like, okay, actually Spectrometer is kind of cool in that deck. That works nicely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different things you can do with this. And it all just goes back to not playing Artivore in your Tristan deck.
It does really. It's not a recommended line. I would say it's pretty awkward to do that. But I mean, I don't know. You got to do what you got to do, I guess.
You do have to do what you got to do because like we said, these 3v3 decks, you're gonna run out of options very quickly. Even though we have a lot more regalia this time around, the pool is still very limited. So I think we'll leave that kind of for you guys to ponder as you get ready for Ascent Worlds and get your teams together and get your lists together and figure out. But in the meantime, I think we've kind of covered a lot of things that we wanted to with the material deck. And hopefully that gets you kind of thinking a little bit more about how you can complement your main deck with your material deck instead of just trying to draw all the cards all the time. And don't get me wrong, drawing cards is awesome. We all love it. Like, if anybody who's resolved a Lost in Thought for 4 or 5 is just over the moon. It's insane.
It's so good.
But you know what else is really good? It's just like playing I win the game on demand, and that's what some of these material deck cards do. So,
or it's at least I don't lose right now, which means I win next turn.
Exactly. Yes. Yep. Sometimes you just need that one turn. So
it's complicated. I'd say we actually just barely scratched the surface of the discussion. So I hope people still found something of value in there. Definitely think a lot about your material lines, what you're doing. And I don't think we even really talked about like meta considerations. Like we glanced it a little bit as we talked about like things like Quicksilver Grail and Safeguard for fractals, but like, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other thing, is like, what decks are you preparing for?
You asked me earlier, kind of like just trying to put people in the correct mind space to think about how to include cards in the material deck. And a lot of that went into what your main deck is doing, but a lot of it is also what the metagame is. Like if you're preparing for a locals, what are the people at your locals playing and how can you answer that? If you're going to an ascent, what is the overall meta and what are you expecting and what are you trying to defend against? That's super deep as well, and we do not have time to get into it, unfortunately.
No.
I think on the next episode. Yeah, exactly. Next episode will probably be a little delayed as well, since it's lining up right with when we're traveling to Worlds. Yep. So I think what I would like to do is maybe record the week after and kind of shift our schedule, but we'll see what happens there. We'll get an episode out for you in a somewhat timely manner, but it will not be, unfortunately, right in cadence with this current episode.
It'll probably be in 3 weeks, and it'll be a very special episode where I am talking to second Grand Archive World Champion, Taylor Bow.
Wow. You had a really nice opportunity to throw Mitch's name out in there, and that's what I would have done, because Mitch is my friend, but I appreciate the shout out and the confidence.
It's a called shot, baby. Here we go.
Yep. Here we go. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Next time, here we go.
Come back for it, everyone. Well, you're not going to want to miss that one.
You are not going to want to miss it.
We're going to talk a lot about the secret deck that he has been preparing all season to unveil only at day 2 of Worlds.
Yep. And you'll have to tune in to find out what it is. Until then, thank you for listening to the Recollection Step, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, everyone.